Hey community, welcome back. And if this is your first time here, I'm Dr. Blaire, a doc in clinical psychology. And on this channel, we discuss psychology, inspiration, social justice, and all topics in between. First things first, hit that subscribe button. I need to see you back next week. And of course, today I have yet another special guest here with me today, and we will be discussing reparations for the African American community. Stay tuned. All right, community, here I have with me none other than Dr. Mo B. She is coming from St. Louis, and I love her dearly because we are here to talk about reparations for the African American or Black American community. So thank you so much, Dr. Mo, for joining me to have this discussion. It is a discussion that is past due, and I know a lot of people are starting to talk about it a bit more, or maybe we're hearing about it a little bit more from the general public because neither one of us are attorneys, but I just want to thank you so much for coming, and I want you to give an opportunity to just kind of jump into what are your thoughts around reparations, what are reparations, so on and so forth.
Okay, what I live in and we are a part of. When I think about reparations, we can actually just kind of look at the definition of what that word would mean. It's just making a wrong right is the simple thing for me. My mind immediately goes to, can you make the wrong right at this point? So that's the question that I would have. I don't know that we could give, and I may be jumping ahead, but I don't know that we could give any bill could rectify 250 years of cruelty, 50 years of Jim Crow, segregation, redlining, institutional racism, inequities in healthcare. I don't know that anything at this point you could do, unless you are going to flip the system upside down, would actually explain what the needs are for the Black American community.
Yeah.
So reparations to me is wrong and you're right. How do you give us, it's almost too late to put us on a fair, what do you say, make the game fair? For whatever that means.
Exactly. Fair.
So that is reparations. What do you do at this point to recognize that we are due? We are due.
To put it in plain words, and
right.
even the definition of to right a wrong is so good, because I know a lot of academic folks want to throw in all the fancy words. One group to do this to wrong another group for X amount of like, you are right, that is what it is, and it's actually unfair because you can't right that wrong as much as you can. This is an apology. That's what reparation says. You're right. We were wrong, and this is how we want to try to level the playing field. But to your point, things aren't necessarily fair. And we've got this huge push that we've been doing for the past X amount of years around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so with equity and inclusion, this is not just the idea of fair, but everybody starting off with the same foot forward. And we know that that doesn't really exist. Let's be honest. And it's this fantasy, and it's this thing that we're working towards, and we will have to work centuries towards that, because it's been centuries of damage being done. And so to heal our communities of centuries of wrongs, even to this day, even to 2022, wrong being done to our community, to say that to push the initiative of equity is just the start of it. We are still scratching the surfaces of the deeply hurting wounds that are not healed to this day in the Black American community. And I love that so much. It is a push to right a wrong. And I know that there are a lot of groups and organizations that are really working toward developing reparation initiatives for the Black American community, because we are the only group who has not gotten reparations. The only. And honestly, when I say that, it hurts more every time to think that we are the only. And that is just a perpetuation of the cycle that we have been talking about, the perpetuation of the history that we have yet to this very day. Even when people want to say, oh, racism doesn't exist, lies. Even when people want to say things like that, well, then tell me why this is still not settled.
Right. And you can't have a conversation about reparations without talking about inequality.
Right.
And you can't. It is just that. So when you think about reparations and how do you restore in good conditions 400 years of not just over 400 years, if you think about 1619, we're on like almost 403 years technically, right?
You know what? And I've said this in another episode, but I don't believe that I should say this. I do not trust that these history books have accurately captured when slavery actually started. And if historically we know for a fact that history has been hidden from us, has been erased, and or that there's been this mission to end talking about Black American history in the way that it needs to be, then I am very confident that that is still going on to this very day. And it is possible that things were not accurately recorded, or there wasn't a historian there to capture what truly happened and when it all started. So I don't know if that number is accurate anyway.
You're right. And people say that, and I do agree. And I like that you said inequalities that have existed, and they're still existing today. There was this city group I don't know if you had an opportunity, they did like 104 page in 2020 in September. And I know during the that thing we had going on that's still going on, we had a lot of time to read. I know I did. I was reading everything, every study that was out, every book that I wanted to read and didn't get an opportunity. But September 2020, Citigroup, they published their Global Perspective and Solutions. That's a group within the Citigroup. They published a 104-page study that talks about closing the Black wage gap and how it's really closing the racial inequalities gaps that, the economic cost between Black inequality in the US. And they talked about in this study that gap has cost 2.7 trillion in income.
My God.
That's a lot of money, right? And instead, the economy could actually have benefited over the last 20 years by closing these gaps between wage and housing and financial institution, you name it, all of the inequalities. If they would have closed this gap, the economy in the US would have been so much better.
Right.
And it's when I was reading through that study and just kind of trying to remember some of the things that they were saying in the study and some of the research, I just sat back and said, now, what does reparations look like? Where do they start, right? Where do they start? And it's almost because it's systematic, you've almost got to tear down the whole system.
You do.
And start it over. That's the easiest thing to say, is start over. That won't happen. I hate to be, I'm hopeful, right? My hope lies in Christ pretty much, but I'm hopeful that things can happen, but I'm still a realist. The reality of it is reparations in which we deserve won't ever happen, because that means a group of people have to give up the power. It won't happen. It just won't happen. I often think about, what does reparation look like for many of us? That I'm gonna be selfish right now. Reparations for me, Dr. Blaire, if I had to talk about it, reparations for me right now would be wipe the student loan debt. Just wipe it out.
I received that. I've been praying about
it. Wipe it out. Why is that a problem? Wipe it out. Especially when there are statistics that show Black Americans hold the larger percent of student loan debt. Wipe it out. You want to start with reparations? Hit the button and wipe that out.
And that was the key word, start.
Right. No. That's not the end all be all.
Right. And I want to share something with you. Now, y'all, we said we weren't experts, so
Right.
I'm gonna pull up the handy dandy phone to share some of this with you. But the National African American Reparations Commission is a group of professionals across the country, of attorneys, law professionals, academic folks, some medical folks. You got a group of people who are coming together to work on an initiative specifically for reparations. And the point that you just brought up, we brought up that is just the start. And if you all, and I will make sure I put this in the description box, but if you all go to their website, they have a 10-point plan that focuses on several different areas of reparation. And I know a lot of times when we hear reparations, what we say, I want my money, give me my money. And that wouldn't be fair to yourself. It wouldn't be fair to me. That money is just it's a tool, but just as soon as you get money in your hand, it could be gone, right?
You got to know what to do with it.
You have to know what to do with it. And I want us to get into that later, but some of the points around reparation that they mentioned is they want an official apology, because I don't think we've gotten a clear-cut apology of what has been done. And then they talk about developing a program so that we can build on our own African knowledge. And I love that, because we have to know where we came from in order to know where we're going to go moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
And number 3 is the right to land for social and economic development. And so, I mean, there's so much more here, even around social responsibility and really helping to build on businesses in the Black community. They even get into talking about wellness and the need for services physically and mentally to help to heal us. And I love the things that they have laid out, and I'm sure we all can point out more points, but I really recommend us all to go and read that 10-point and actually figure out a way that you can support them, even if it's just spread the word. That is free, to spread the word and to get behind a mission that's going to help you, your community, and your future generations. And so the point around it's just a start is so critical, because it is. And I know that we have been working towards being treated as humans since the moment we stepped foot on this country, into this land. We have been working on being treated as humans, and there are still moments that we experience that makes us feel like we are not considered humans to this day, because it is so deeply threaded into the tapestry of American history. And I believe it goes beyond these 50 United States. We even see a lot of the same trends that happen in South America. And I know that we don't talk about all of the Black South Americans that live there, but there are many Black South Americans. There are many Black folks that are in the islands, as we know, and even the Latinx communities. Most of those people on those islands are Black as well. So the healing that is needed for us up here in the 50 states is the same thing that's needed south of our border.
And I say, it's funny you said that. It really isn't just on America. I think France, I think Britain, I think all of the Western countries, Spain, they need to come together and figure out how they're going to offer reparations across this world, because it's a global issue. Anywhere you go in the world, there are Black people that are on the lowest socioeconomic, who are struggling across the globe. It's unfortunate. I want to say brown to be political correct, Black and brown, but at this point, I've got to really talk about those who are descendants from the African that they, took us from. That's what I'm talking about at this point when we're talking about reparations. Not saying that another group doesn't deserve reparations, but right now at this point, we're talking about Black Americans for reparations. But then I am also speaking about Blacks that are global, right? Those that are left in the islands, right? Those that the Blacks who were sent to Haiti, they're due. France owes, reparations should be a global conversation on global stages, right? Like we have these what are the conferences, the geo conferences. There should be a conference right now going on about with the Western countries. What do we do to provide reparations for Black people all over this world? Right? And let's talk about the minimum wages, right? If 38% of Black people currently work and earn minimum wage, but we only represent 11 to 12% of the population in the workforce in America, what's wrong with that picture? Close the gap. Start with minimum wage salary. We have people fighting over $15 an hour.
And that's high.
And $15 an hour, and we're still arguing and saying that people don't deserve it. That's not even a living wage.
Yeah.
When you consider $15 an hour after taxes.
In Missouri, just a curious question.
Some places.
Okay. Because it is in Illinois, Chicago. But I was talking to somebody recently, and I believe it is like 7 something in Texas. So even still the federal minimum wage, because we know that state doesn't have to, agree with the federal, but the federal minimum wage is still at $7.25, I believe. And maybe we're showing our privilege right now, but at the end of the day, that's a just to be honest. But at the end of the day, that's a really good point that economically, many of our people are still earning that type of wage, and there are many barriers that refrains from us going beyond that point. And even the reparations has to include some part in their initiative to help remove those barriers.
Absolutely.
Which I believe is probably more important than the money, because the money can come, but if we don't teach each other and be open to learning how to keep the money and how to build on our communities, then it won't stay. But that's another conversation for another day. As much as that is such a good point around, we're fighting on things that really that people want to say is small, but it's major.
Huge. It's huge. If I'm 3 or 4 generations out and we've never owned our own home, then I'm already behind.
Yeah.
I mean, you're even thinking about the process of buying a home for many people. That's an unheard of concept or idea or thought. Whereas there are some ethnic groups in America, a home is part of the gift for the wedding. The wedding gift is your down payment on your home.
Right.
Where we still talking about the American dream, many of us. And then we have unfair lending practices. So there are so many ways that reparations can look, or let me say, there are so many things that they can do for Black Americans at this point. And it's not about, okay, so you're in Illinois, right? You're from Chicago. Can we talk about Evanston, Illinois?
Let's talk about it.
Okay.
They had, how many years ago is this at this point? At least 2 years ago.
2019.
Right on the dollar. So at least 2 years ago, in 2019, Evanston, Illinois, came up with an agreement that they were going to give reparations to African Americans in that community, but there were some stipulations around this, and I can't remember as clearly. So if you do, please feel free to chime in. And I know that when we all heard, I should say me, if I knew how to do flip-flops, I would have, because I was so happy to finally hear, because there's so much talk around reparations, but very few conversations are it actually happened. It has come through and there has been an agreement. So a hoorah, but it was a big deal.
Okay, so I was excited, but again, I asked so many questions in my head. Nobody's answering these questions for me, but this is just what I do. Yeah. So when I was reading about Evanston, Illinois, and I thought, oh, this is good. And it is good. Don't get me wrong. It's $25,000. And I think one of the stipulations is that you had to be able to prove that you had ancestors who lived, and it was something like from 1919 to 1969 or something, that lived in Evanston. And then you could qualify for this $25,000 toward the purchase of a home, or I think it was like home improvement and mortgage assistance.
Right.
Great.
But
I started thinking now, how much is the average home in Evanston? I'm like, how many people can actually afford? And then when you give us $25,000,
it's not much.
It's not much. And I'm thinking, a couple years ago, I got my kitchen remodeled, and I'm thinking, $25,000, I still need the basement remodeled, but that's not enough to finish the, simple work. And while it is great, I was like, it really doesn't still put us on an equal playing field. Right. It still is really not reparations. And I know and I think they had a name. It was I don't remember. They had a name for it. But the concept is wonderful. And I'm happy that there is talks, they're doing something. I think the first round of people who filled out the application, they've been assisting them. It is great. But at the same time, $25,000, if you want to buy a house, you still have to qualify from the bank.
Right.
So who's addressing the banks with all the redlining that still happens?
Still.
With us to even get the $25,000 to be able to afford the house. It's great. And I'm happy they're doing something, but I figured
it was a pinch on that.
It was, but it's a federal thing. And it's great Illinois is doing it, but this has to be a federal mandate.
I love that mandate, but I'm going to go back to what you said earlier, which I had not, and I agree so much, but I hadn't put that language to. It has to be a global mandate.
Yes.
It has to be not only, and from the angle, we oftentimes have to, when you're in business and you're in corporate, that you have to find the financial impact. If you can prove that this will make a financial impact, then you can move on to the next stage and trying to accomplish whatever it is that you need to get approval. So that is such a great angle to prove that this is going to not only help our community, but it will help the communities at large, which unfortunately we know will then start dabbling into conversations around that means that some folks are going to lose power. That's really where a lot of this comes down to. But if it can build everyone's community, then that's a great angle to prove that we need to do something globally, because a lot of countries across our world would agree that they want to improve globally. Would you not agree? Like, who could not agree with that? So I'm curious around ideas that you have or even have heard about. I know we used to both sit in on a lot of conversations on Clubhouse. For those who are on Clubhouse, please feel free to give us both a follow. I'll make sure that information is in the description box. But we heard a lot of conversations around reparations and different views around what people feel like who reparations should be for. We're talking about this global impact, and we know that a few of y'all will probably be coming for us, but that's okay. We still love you, but let us know what you think in the comments. But who should reparations be for?
So I have I agree with some of those heated conversations. So for those of you who are not on Clubhouse, some of the conversations were reparations should only be for descendants of the transatlantic slave trade. So that would be Black Americans, people who are parents or descendants came from an African country, and we didn't migrate here. We didn't immigrate here. We were forced to migrate here. That is the definition that most people feel like reparations is for. While I do agree, only, right? Only. Okay. Now I agree. Here's why I agree with that to an extent, but there's some caveats, some nuance to that. I agree with it because we know that no other group of people went through the type of crimes to humanity that like we did, right? I understand that, like our ancestors did. There was no other slave trade, I don't care what anybody says, like the one that we experience here in America. No other, period. So while I agree with that, however, we do have to understand that Black people globally were enslaved. right? When you say that to
felt
me,
that.
right? We were enslaved. Look at the people.
Yes.
Look what happened to the Haitians, right? How do you leave them out of the conversation? Now, if we're just talking about the U.S., yeah, okay, have a bill, let that bill for the U.S. But again, I mentioned earlier, on a global scale, France owes Haiti, right? African countries that were colonized by Britain, colonized by France and Spain and Portugal are due. So they should be a part of the reparations conversation as well. Why I feel like, we can't include them because then it wouldn't be enough for us. Mm-hmm. That's that crab in the barrel mentality to me, right? Is that we only think about ourselves. And I think that we should think about all Blacks, especially in the US, because just understand that Africans aren't here because they want to be here. Many of them, if they had I can almost probably bet you the great majority of them, if they could get the same access to the same type of jobs and housing and education in the countries that were destroyed by the colonizers, they wouldn't be here. So I think that reparations should come to anybody. If you were a descendant of the transatlantic slave trade, as well as if you were left on African continent, you were dropped off in the Caribbeans. Yeah, you are in the Blacks in Brazil. Brazil has the largest number of Blacks, right? So when you think about that, they're due too. So there are two conversations that need to happen at the same time.
I want us to kind of walk with me on this one because I have this concept, and maybe some people will agree, maybe you won't, but just again, be open to the conversation. I have this concept that when our people were taken from our land, brought all the way over here to the West, that we oftentimes focus on the harm that was done to us. But we don't talk about the harm that was done to them. Absolutely. They lost something too. They lost their families. They lost their lineage. They lost what was expected to be the future, or they may have lost parts of their history as well. We had communities in Africa, so we hear, that's passed along information and history through folklores by sharing information word of mouth. Now, imagine this. If you have a community of 30 or 100 people in your community, and now all of a sudden it has decreased. Each person in that community had a role. They had a role that they fulfilled. Now that that person is gone and we don't know why, or we do, who's fulfilling that role? Absolutely. So there has been a loss on both hands from a different end of the spectrum. But at the end of the day, to say that we are all the only ones who have been impacted, I have a hard time agreeing with that. I believe that there has been impact here as well, and we don't necessarily just focus in on it as much, or there isn't a strong enough line of communication between us and them in order to start talking about what the impact is. And this is why I love countries like Ghana, which you have visited often, and I'm mad because she ain't took me yet, but we're gonna go. Where there are a lot of conversations are being had, and there has been this plan, this desire, this heart's desire to repair our relationships between West Africa, where most of the slaves came from, and Black Americans across the board. And I love that we're starting to work on repairing that relationship and opening up lines of communication so that we can know the other parts of the story that we aren't going to be told. We have to seek that out on our own. And so this part around there is a global impact, there is. We know that if it's a Black person anywhere on this earth, we know where they came from. Absolutely. It means that all of our roots come from Africa, right? And if all of our roots come from Africa, we've just spread and dispersed, then the fact that it's a global impact makes a whole lot of sense to me. It seems pretty logical that they deserve something as well. I'm just saying.
And I think, if we would work together. Because what Black Americans keep forgetting, and I even say, because I'm in the African community, I have to say to them too, because I have these arguments with my African friends all the time. We are stronger together, and that's true. Black Americans need to realize that we are becoming a smaller minority. We are the smallest minority now, right? And so we need the other Black Americans or Africans that are in America. We need them, just like they need us, right? We need each other. And I like that you're saying this movement of us communicating. And I think it's all because of the lack of education and the lack of community and conversations that we have not had for so long, that now it's happening, right? It's happening. I love Ghana. Recently had an opportunity to go to Senegal, and they are woke in Senegal. For whatever that word may mean to the masses, meaning they understand that the narratives that are written and we think that we know are not the truth, right? Yeah. Many of them are very woke to what needs to happen between us, what has happened. Many of them know their history. Unlike, I got a sense that a lot of people in Ghana over my 6 visits there, and they didn't really partake in the same history, the slave history that happened. Whereas when I was in Senegal, I got just a sense that they knew a lot more. And then my Senegalese friends here, that I'm friends with in the US, that the conversations are a little different, because it seems like they know a little bit more about what happened. And they didn't take the same stance that some of the other people took in Africa. But I think reparations,
some of the other people in other countries.
Yes. So what I meant by that, it seems like to me that some of the Islamic or Muslim countries, they seem to have fought a little differently. Their fight was a little different. I think that they understood, in conversation with those that I know, they have just a little bit more awareness of the Black narrative globally, as well as, what happened there in Senegal. So that was an eye opener. And to me, I think reparations has to include the larger Black community. And I think the US, again, I said it before, and I mean this, Doc, that I want to be hopeful. I want to be an optimistic person on this. But reality is, just do is not going to happen in our lifetime. Until we need, first of all, we got so many things to fight for, but I think that we need to educate ourselves on what can happen. What can happen? Where can we press our politicians, our local government? Where can we write? Because I've written letters, I've signed petitions, I'm on it with the student loans, I'm on it feeling like higher educations for Black students should not be the cost that it is. It should really be based on this is part of your reparations package. You want to give reparations.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that it's going to take all of us to work this this reparations deal out, because if we have these conversations in America, then people are going to start to have a conversation in other parts of the world as well. And so when I do better, my community does better, my people globally does better. And I think that's how the lens in which we should look at reparations.
Yeah, that is so good, because we're not talking about a problem. We're talking about a plethora of problems that has made this overarching concern or issue that we've gone through, this cycle that we've been going through, continue. And, I love the point around global. We are both agreeing there. I think we've, gone into depth in many ways as to why we see it as a global concern and a global need that needs to be filled here. So we talking about nationally, it needs to happen. We even talked about local, statewide, nationally, and globally, this needs to be addressed. All resources need to be put together to address this. Now, I want to jump into our community because that conversation requires for us to go to them and them to come to us. We all need to be at the table for that conversation to address this list. But on this list, inside our community, there are things we need to be doing for our own reparations. And I don't mean in the sense of them righting this wrong that we start off the conversation around, but there are things that we need to invest in ourselves. Like, for instance, around healing. We know that as a community, Black people need healing. Then what are we doing to help heal ourselves? And so I started this platform. Part of the reason is to target trauma, to heal people, which I believe will then yield into changing systems. And I know that this is a process that takes a long time. Anybody who goes on any of my social media, you'll see target trauma, heal people, change systems. You'll see that consistently. And I believe in it to my core. I even work on program development to be able to get at these key points. But this is my charge to all of the people who are going to see this. Then what are you doing? We are so good. And I'm not going to say this as Black people, but we are so good as human beings to sit down and talk about problems. I mean, we can kiki about problems all day long, sip on some tea, girl, tell me what happened. We can do it all day long with no problem, but it becomes a bit more resistant. We have a bit more of an issue. It becomes a bit more challenging when we're actually talking about solving the problem. So I am charging everybody who is seeing this, and also myself and Dr. Moby, the explorer, who I believe is also a solutionist like myself, that we have to look for the solutions to all of the problems that's in this cycle. And so I'm curious about what are some solutions that you know of or that you're already partaking in to address this outside of having a conversation like this for people to listen in on. What are some other solutions that you thought of?
When you mean the solutions around reparations?
Solutions around this list of what the Black community can be doing for ourselves without having to involve others.
Right. So I've been in education for almost 23 years. Educational leadership, right? Research, evaluation, data. And so for me, it's about education outside of the school building. So one of the solutions for me is that we've got to educate ourselves. And I'm not talking about going to school, making sure you graduate. That's one piece of the education, but re-educating ourselves, like Carter G. Woodson said it, we've been miseducated. And so I think that one of the solutions is and I'm working on that, we've got to start to develop think tanks for everybody, not just for academia, but for the laymen, for our communities, to educate ourselves on who we are. What do we need to do economically? How do we grow our own healthy communities? How do we become entrepreneurs when there is not a job available for us? What do we do? Who do we go to? How do we pull our resources together to support each other again? How do we become the village that we once had again? And so we have to educate ourselves on what are our options. How do we think differently? How do we change our mindset? It has to be a shift in mindset. If we continue on the path that we're on now, we won't see progress with the masses. If one or two people are making change and not the masses and the majority of us, then change is not occurring in my mind. Okay. So I start with something that we can do that doesn't take a lot of money. Is to start to form little community circles. I'm calling them think tanks. We can call them community of learners, whatever name we have to have. And we start to really educate ourselves, understand the system in which we live in. And that's one, and this is a sidebar, but that's one of the things that I have observed with people who migrate here to the US, not forced, but immigrants. They learn the system in which they live in. They learn how to effectively navigate the rules and the systems and what resources are available to them. Whereas many of us, we were born and raised in this system, and we still lack the knowledge to maneuver the system. I'm not saying get over, but how do you learn when the system isn't working for you? What do you do?
Right.
That's the conversations we need to have. To me, that's the starting point. That's our own reparations. We owe ourselves the education that they're not teaching us in school. We owe it to each other to provide that. If I know something, it is my responsibility to make sure we all know that. And that to me is a first starting point. And that's our own personal reparations. And one in which I think our ancestors will be proud of. And it is just our moral responsibility and obligation should be, I teach you, I learn, I give it to you. You learn, you give it to me, we give it to us.
Yeah.
And we can do that Saturday morning. Meet me at the coffee house. And I have these conversations with my friends. I'm starting these conversations in our school district. What do we have to do to be better us?
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. And if I could add to that, I can't help but to say that we have to be willing to listen. And I say that from a few different angles. If we are willing to listen to one another, to different perspectives, and this is part of the reason why I decided to go into a professional degree in psychology. This is one of the reasons why I decided to go in psychology, period. I graduated from Tuskegee University with a bachelor's in science and psychology. And one of the things that drew me to psychology was I was always fascinated about why people did the things that they do. And learning the back history. Sometimes when you see something off bat, you're like, oh, that was wrong. And then you learn about the back history, you're like, oh, but it makes sense why you did that. Then it becomes not so wrong. But if we're willing to listen to one another, it opens up our eyes, it opens up our perspective to be able to see life from another person's angle, another person's vantage point. And the more vantage points we have, then that answer doesn't become so black and white. We are able to now see all of the gray in between. And I believe a lot of our solutions are going to be in the grays of life. And I say that with the utmost respect, that sometimes we're not so willing to listen to one another, but we're a little bit more willing to listen to people outside of our community, and it's hurtful. Even Jesus said that sometimes people outside of your own community, your neighborhood will be willing to accept you. That's scripture. So I am here to push all of us to be willing to listen to one another and willing to listen to another perspective as we are in search and becoming more in touch and connected with the solutions that are needed for our communities. I believe that also listening, as it gets down to educating ourselves, is there's another part of being willing to listen to other perspectives. The other part of listening is being open to actually receive what you are hearing.
Yeah.
And how many times have we, as kids, your mama calling you, say, "Are you listening?" No, you hear me, but are you listening? Like, sometimes we're listening and we're just hearing the words that are being said. It's going in one ear and out the other. And I can't tell you how many times I was in school, in grammar school, and I'm hearing a lesson and it's going in one ear and on out the other. I heard what was said, right? But I wasn't actually listening to comprehend. I wasn't actually listening to receive the information that is being said, to actually sit down and chew on it, to reflect on it, and think about how to then apply it in my life. And so my challenge is that we are all being in a position to listen, to hear the information, to receive the information, to chew on it, comprehend it, and make it applicable to life. And then we move yet another step closer to the solutions that are needed for our community. But we can't do it if we shut off to all of that. It won't happen, because we're talking about what we're talking about right now, you and I and others who are having this conversation. And for those of you who are first chiming in to listen to this, you are now a part of a discussion that will impact generations. We're talking about future generations beyond you. That we're talking about doing the work that will impact generations beyond what we see today. And as you said earlier, you don't know if you are feeling very confident that it can happen in our lifetime. Well, my prayer, and I decree and declare that we do see something in our lifetime. And if it is at the beginning, very beginning stages, that's okay. That's all right. Because what we are decreeing and we're declaring today is that we're going to do the work that will help generations before. And I believe that's the scripture in Psalms, that we are going to do the work that will impact generations in the future. And that means that we have to be okay with that. During the 70s, when they were fighting against Jim Crow, they weren't fighting against Jim Crow just because it was going to happen then or impact them then. It impacted us to this very day.
Right.
So we have to do things that are not just going to help us right now, because we want this, we desire this this immediate gratification, this instant relief to let go of the pressure that we've been dealing with all of our lives. We are in desire of that so badly, which makes sense. Again, if you look at the history, it makes sense why you would want that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that my children's children are going to see the work that I did today, but I have to think about them. And I have to think about what's going to happen. And the word also says a good man leaves a treasure or something like that for the future generations. You have to leave something that when you're gone, what did you leave? Did you set them up? Did you do something for them to be able to move forward? And that is what we're talking about here. Unfortunately, the conversation we're having now, our grandparents had it too.
Yeah.
That might have hurt. Our grandparents had it, and their grandparents had it too. Now, that doesn't mean that some work wasn't done. It has. There has been progress.
Absolutely.
But how far are we digging into the well that we need to be digging into? Not just today. Not just for the children I don't have, but for the future generations. That's what we're doing this for. And I mean, I could go on and on. Excuse me if I got a little too passionate, but I'm going on because I love this. I love being able to get to this because I am listening. I'm hearing you say things and I am listening in a way to be able to receive it and digest it. Again, I hadn't even thought about the global perspective. I thought about it, but I never put that language to it. Like, yeah, there needs to be a global conversation being had. There needs to be a global connection happening here. You are so right. But what if I wasn't open to listening?
Yeah.
What I was like, oh, Dr. Moby, she don't know what she's talking about. Or I'm just sitting here like, no. Be open to listen and receive the information and then pass it on.
And that's how but that is really how you change your perspective, and it allows you to actually transform your thoughts. That's how we're going to transform our communities. We're going to talk, and critical discourse should happen. We need it. We're listening to one another, like you said, and then we're taking action.
Right.
And we're taking action. And it may, like you said, a lot of times we may not see it in this generation. It may take the Joshua generation to come and realize what this Moses generation is doing. However, we have to do the work.
Yeah, we do.
And we have to do the work. And you said something, and I was thinking as you were talking, you're right. If we're not healed, the work won't happen.
Amen.
Effectively.
That's so good. Yeah.
It won't happen. Because we're so focused in on the hurt and the wound,
right,
that we can't do the work that's necessary. So we do have to heal ourselves from just the trauma of everyday life.
Yeah.
Which is why we need reparations, because a lot of our trauma, whether we know it or not, is stemmed from years and years of cycles, generational curses not being broken. And now we have products of what we're seeing now, but until we can heal, then we can go forward. Right. And sometimes you have to do the healing and the work at the same time. And so I'm happy we have people like you who are doing the work of trying to help us to become whole so that we can activate what we need inside of us to do the work that is necessary. And so we're happy to have people like you, Doc, that are doing the work, and you are in the work, and you know about what's needed and what we need to do to kind of get ourselves together, because all of us need some form of healing.
Yes, we do.
Right?
We do.
And so that could be a part of your reparation package to yourself, to our community. We can say, you know what, we're going to heal from the trauma. We're not going to forget the things the crimes that were committed against us. We will never forget those. But how do we push?
Right. Yeah.
How do we push past that so that we can get our due?
Yeah, that's good. I love that. Thank you so much. And I did another video around transgenerational trauma. So I will also encourage you all to go and take a look at that, go to my channel. But even with transgenerational trauma, with healing, I mean, we have so many things that are out on the table. We talked about making sure that there's a global impact on all the way down to the local impact or conversation that is needing to have. Be willing to go beyond what they teach you in the school, but also do some education outside of that. And I know that a lot of times when we hear education, we think formal education, and I'm a firm believer that you can gain knowledge and educate yourselves way beyond the school and the school books. We have talked about listening to each other to actually receive and hear and make it applicable, to apply it to your lives, because we are doing work. We're going to do the work to impact generations moving forward. And I have loved this conversation so much, but before we end, I need to make sure that everybody knows who Dr. Mo B the Explorer is and how they can get in contact with you, because you also have a YouTube channel and a business. So make sure you mention that. So how can people stay in contact with you?
Okay, so I do have a YouTube channel, and it's about exploring conversations as well as places near and afar, conversations that are going to be geared toward a healthier Black community. So conversations on the channel with Jamaicans and Black Americans and Africans and Black Americans. So just developing true community. So I am on YouTube as Moby the Explorer. I also have a business where you can beexplorers.com. And it's really about attire. So what we do is we purchase African attire when we travel the continent, or if my family goes home, we get African fabric. My mother is a seamstress, and then I support one African lady that's in Ghana, and we purchase material and we purchase outfits from her. And so the website is really about empowering a person on the continent to be able to make extra income, as well as my mother. So beexplorers.com. We have t-shirts and African clothing that is purchased, the fabrics are purchased either from Ghana or Senegal. And so I encourage you to take a look at the channel. And I explore all things that are new and dear to my heart.
Yes, she does. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming. She actually covers some of her travels as well and her experiences, and talks about it. And I love that. I have watched almost every single one of the videos that you've posted. So please be sure to go on over to her channel. And if you are not a person who has gotten that passport or gotten it stamped yet, sometimes you can live through other people vicariously and you'll learn about some of her experiences. I'm encourage you to go and look in the description box. I'll have all of her information there to support her initiative. And one more time, thank you so much for coming. This has been a pleasure. And this is just the start of the conversation. And I want to be sure that I have you back someday.
Yes, please. Please check out my channel. She was on my channel as well. Yeah, so please check it out. I think we had a conversation about plus size women.
We did.
Good conversation.
Check it out. And just the call to action to all of you is to make sure that you are actually taking this information that we've discussed and use it. Don't just sit on it. Don't just let it, be in your head. Actually share it with someone else. Share this video with someone else. Share the information with someone else and apply it to your life. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. Share this video with someone else. Do not hold this information to yourself. As we mentioned earlier, we want to be sure that our community gets the information and that we are applying this information to our lives. And remember, before you go, and I see you next time, if I'm great and you're great, then we're a great community.